Alright guys, we're looking at Isaiah chapter 3 today. We saw in the first chapter of Isaiah, God is talking to them about their religiosity and about their blind observance to things like holy days and feast days and sacrifices and things like that. And God is telling them, look, I don't want any part of that. I want your heart. In Jerusalem at the time, in Judah, they were seeking after the gift and not the giver. And that rolls into chapter 2, where God actually, out of His mercy and grace, begins to explain to them the futility. Now, keep it in context here that this is God here that we're speaking about. God doesn't have to explain anything to us, but God tells Judah and Jerusalem about the futility of their efforts in seeking after all of these things instead of seeking after Him. And He tells them, look, you're wasting your time seeking after all these things like gold and stuff like that, because in the end it's all going to get burnt up anyway, and you're going to be left basically naked and desolate, finding a hole in a rock somewhere to hide. So He tells them, don't be that guy, turn back to me. But He goes on and talks about in chapter 3, and we're going to read the first couple of verses here. It says, "For behold, the Lord of hosts, doth take away from Jerusalem and from Judah the stay and the staff, the whole stay of bread and the whole stay of water, the mighty man and the man of war, the judge and the prophet, and the prudent and the ancient, the captain of 50 and the honorable man, and the counselor and the cunning artificer, and the eloquent orator. And I will give children to be their princes, and babes shall rule over them." And one of the things that I want to see here is a couple of things. Number one, that the implication here is that it's God that gives the mighty their strength. It's God that gives the skilled laborers their skills. It's God that gives us not just our opportunities, but He gives us the actual skills and the abilities and the talents to be able to capitalize on certain opportunities in our lives. And what God is telling them here is that as this stuff starts to happen in the future, and as a form of judgment, I'm going to remove the might from the mighty. I'm going to remove the skills from the artificer. I'm going to remove the wisdom from the old and the wise and things like that, and basically I'm going to leave you with children and princes to rule over you. Now this is significant because, especially coming on the heels of 8 years of Obama, and I'm not getting into a whole lot of political stuff here, but what it says here is that we get the rulers that we deserve. A lot of us have a tendency to come against these particular rulers. I don't like Obama, or I don't like Trump, or I don't, and understand it really makes no difference, because from a biblical perspective, we get the rulers that we deserve, not just from an electoral standpoint by virtue of us electing, but that God places rulers in power over us that we deserve. When we seek Him first, and we're not seeking after things, when we're not seeking after riches or fame or glory or any of these things, but we seek God first, we get godly rulers. When we seek after things the way that Israel did, they get ungodly rulers. They get people who are completely unqualified to run a nation. They get children and children to be princes, and babes to rule over them. So it's kind of a principle that I wanted to kind of point out there that I thought was pretty significant. And then he goes on through the rest of the chapter here, and he talks about additional things that are going to kind of take place, and conversations that are taking place. But as we get to the end of the chapter, something else that I want to see here is, once again, God comes back to the futility of our efforts, and He says in verse 24, "And it shall come to pass," and He's talking about basically, once again, prophecy in the future. You value all these things, you value all these gifts and not the givers. And He says, "And it shall come to pass that instead of sweet smell there shall be stink, and instead of a girdle a rent, and instead of a well-set hair baldness, and instead of a stomacher, which is fine clothes, a girding of sackcloth, and burning instead of beauty." So basically He tells them, look, you people are vain. If it's vanity that you value, God's going to give them scarring. If it's sweet smell that you value, you're going to get stink. And if it's your hair that is important to you, you're going to get baldness. The important thing to look at here is that each one of us has a tendency to gravitate towards certain things that we begin to idolize in our lives, that begin to take precedence. And God says, I'm not going to hit you in these other areas. I'm going to hit you in those specific areas that you put before me. If you value money, I'm going to hit you in the pocketbook. If you value fame, I'm going to bring you low. And the point being is that this in and of itself is still a grace and a mercy, because we are lifting up things as idols in our life, and God is going in and he's removing those idols forcefully if need be. But notice that he's doing this to his children. He's not talking about doing this to the world as a whole. He's talking about doing this to his children. He's disciplining his children. If there's something that his kids should not have, he is going to remove it from them, forcefully if necessary. So, still keeping in mind that God disciplines his children, that God loves his children, and that's why he disciplines them, and he removes those things that he finds harmful to his kids. Still a grace, still a mercy, still a loving God. So, you guys think about that. God bless.